Picture a woman well into her 60s climbing a flight of stairs two at a time. No railing, no hesitation, moving the way most people assume only 20-somethings still can. Nothing about her looks athletic in the way we usually picture it. No gym clothes, no wearable tracker, no visible effort at all. Just legs that simply still do what she asks of them, decades after most people stopped. If you're over 40, you know the quiet, creeping fear around leg strength specifically, the stairs that feel harder than they used to, the knees that complain getting out of a low chair, the vague sense that this particular kind of strength, once lost, doesn't come back. It's not paranoia, it's one of the most common physical declines people notice first, and one of the ones we're told the least about how to actually stop. Here's the myth bust. You'd think rebuilding real leg strength after 40 requires heavy machines, resistance bands, a gym membership, and a trainer watching your form. But look at how Japanese elders actually maintain and even build leg strength well into their 70s and 80s, and you'll notice something almost too simple to believe. No equipment, no gym, just 8 specific movements repeated daily, most of them taking less than a minute each. Researchers studying age-related muscle loss have found that the legs decline faster than almost any other muscle group after 40, not from age itself, but from a simple lack of full-range, load-bearing movement in everyday life, and that the same mechanism that causes the decline is exactly what reverses it if it's given back consistently in small doses. So today, I want to walk you through 8 exercises Japanese elders use to keep their legs strong, sometimes even stronger than they were decades earlier. And by the end, you'll understand exactly why so few of them ever need a cane, a walker, or help getting up off the floor. The first exercise is shagamu, the deep resting squat, heels flat on the ground, hips low, held not as a stretch, but as a natural resting position used throughout the day instead of sitting in a chair. Gardening, waiting for a kettle to boil, chatting with a neighbor, many elders simply drop into this position rather than standing or sitting, the way earlier generations always did before chairs became the default. In the West, we've almost entirely lost this range of motion, treating a deep squat as something reserved for the gym if it's attempted at all. Physiologists studying joint mobility have found that ankle and hip flexibility decline rapidly once a movement pattern stops being used regularly, which means the deep squat isn't difficult because of age, it's difficult because most Western adults stopped practicing it decades before their legs ever needed to remember how. The second exercise is Seiza Karanu Kiritachi, rising from a seated position on the floor without using hands, arms, or furniture for support, relying entirely on the legs to lift the body upright. Because floor seating is common in Japanese homes, elders end up performing this exact movement multiple times a day, completely incidentally, without ever labeling it exercise. In the West, once getting up from the floor becomes even slightly uncomfortable, people simply stop doing it, swapping to furniture permanently and losing the specific leg strength that movement requires along with it. Researchers studying functional aging have identified the ability to rise from the floor unassisted as one of the single strongest predictors of long-term mobility, which means this one habit, preserved simply by never disappearing from daily life, quietly protects independence more than almost anything else on this list. The third exercise is suriashi, a sliding, grounded walk where the feet stay low and connected to the floor rather than lifting high with each step, originally drawn from traditional Japanese movement and still practiced informally by elders moving through the home. Unlike a normal stride, suriashi asks the legs to control weight shift constantly and smoothly, engaging stabilizing muscles a normal walk barely touches. In the West, walking is typically upright and stride forward, rarely asking the legs to manage careful, controlled weight transfer at all. Physical therapists studying balance and fall prevention have found that this kind of low, controlled movement strengthens the exact stabilizer muscles responsible for preventing falls, which means elders practicing suriashi are quietly training the very system most people only start addressing after a fall has already happened. The fourth exercise is Heiko Bataashi, controlled leg swings, holding onto a door frame or counter for balance, swinging one leg forward and back through a slow, full range of motion, then side to side, without momentum doing the work. Elders often build this into a quiet morning routine, treating it as a warm-up before the day's movement begins, rather than a standalone workout. In the West, this kind of controlled range of motion work is usually skipped entirely. We tend to move straight from stillness into activity, asking the hips and legs to perform without ever being asked to move slowly first. Physical therapists studying hip mobility have found that controlled, deliberate leg swings maintain range of motion far more effectively than static stretching alone, since the muscles are being asked to actively control the movement, not just passively lengthen. The fifth exercise is Kaidan no Boru, deliberately choosing stairs over anything easier, not as an occasional effort, but as a consistent daily default, treated the same way brushing your teeth is treated, without debate or exception. It's a small decision, repeated dozens of times a week, that quietly asks the legs to do real work against gravity. In the West, stairs are frequently avoided by default. Elevators, escalators, ramps chosen automatically, even when the difference is only one flight. Researchers studying muscular endurance have found that repeated, moderate load-bearing movement, like stair climbing, builds and maintains leg strength more reliably over years than occasional intense workouts do, simply because consistency compounds in a way single efforts never can. The sixth exercise is Tsumasaki Tachi, rising onto the toes repeatedly, often done while standing at the sink, waiting for water to boil, or brushing teeth, folded into moments that already exist rather than scheduled separately. A slow rise, a brief hold, a slow lower, repeated 10 or 20 times without ever feeling like a formal exercise. In the West, calf strength is rarely addressed at all outside of dedicated gym routines, treated as a minor muscle group rather than one directly tied to balance and fall prevention. Physiologists studying lower leg strength have found that calf muscles play an outsized role in stabilizing the ankle during walking, which means this small incidental habit is quietly protecting against the exact kind of misstep that leads to falls in older adults. The seventh exercise is Fumu Dosa, a rhythmic stepping motion in place, lifting the knees to hip height, or as close as comfortably possible, done for just a minute or two, often to the beat of a favorite song, or simply counted aloud. It's rarely intense, but the deliberate, controlled lifting through a full range asks the hip flexors and quadriceps to do real work without any impact on the joints at all. In the West, this kind of controlled stepping is usually only seen in formal cardio classes, if it's practiced at all outside of them. Physical therapists studying age-related mobility have found that maintaining hip flexor strength specifically is one of the clearest predictors of stride length and walking speed later in life, which means this small rhythmic habit protects something most people never think to train directly. And the eighth exercise, saved for last because it ties every other movement on this list together, is called Yukkuri suwaru, the slow, controlled sit, lowering into a chair over a full 3 to 5 seconds instead of dropping down quickly, and rising the same deliberate way. It sounds almost too small to count as exercise at all, but the difference between a fast, momentum-driven sit and a slow, controlled one is entirely a difference in how much work the legs are actually asked to do. In the West, sitting down is treated as a moment of rest, the fast drop into a chair barely registered as movement at all. Yukkuri suwaru refuses that shortcut, and researchers studying functional strength have found that eccentric, controlled lowering, the kind used in this slow sit, builds and preserves muscle strength even more effectively than the lifting motion itself, which means one of the most powerful exercises on this entire list is something most people already do dozens of times a day, just far too quickly to get any benefit from it. So there it is, 8 small movements, none of them requiring a gym, all of them quietly rebuilding the exact strength most people assume is gone for good after 40. Shagamu keeps hips and ankles fluent in a range of motion Western bodies usually forget entirely. Seiza Kara no Kiritachi preserves the strength to rise from the floor unassisted, one of the strongest markers of independence there is. Suriashi trains the stabilizer muscles most people only address after a fall's already happened. Heiko Bataashi keeps the hips moving through their full range before the day ever asks them to. Kaidan Noboru turns an ordinary daily choice into consistent, compounding strength work. Tsumatsaki Tachi quietly protects ankle stability in moments that already exist. Fumu Dosa trains hip flexors most people never think to train directly, and Yukkuri Suwaru, the slow sit, turns one of the most common movements of the day into one of the most effective exercises on the entire list, simply by refusing to rush it. None of this replaces medical guidance, and if you've already had a fall or have a diagnosed joint condition, that deserves real attention beyond a habit list. This isn't a promise that decades of stiffness reverse overnight, but if you've quietly assumed weak legs were just part of getting older, it might not be age doing that at all. It might be a range of motion that simply stopped being asked for decades before it actually disappeared. So today, try just one. Lower into your chair slowly instead of dropping into it. Rise onto your toes while you wait for the kettle. Take the stairs just this once instead of the easier option. That's enough to start. Because strong legs after 40 were never really about pushing harder. They were about never letting the body forget how to move the way it always could, one small movement at a time. If this gave you something worth trying, there's more like it here, so don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.